as it says here, I'm talking about daring to lead by making a difference. And it's mainly about leadership through difference. And how I wanted to start today is with the following. When I first met Andreas, he introduced me to the organization, and he told me about all of you being headhunting professionals. Now, I love the magic of words. I find it very powerful. So the first thing I wanted to do is to research what actually is headhunting. What is the literal meaning of what you do? So the literal meaning of headhunting is a practice of taking and preserving someone's head. And this was something that took place towards the end of the Middle Ages in Europe. Some experts theorize that the practice stemmed from the belief that the head contains soul matter or life force that could be harnessed through its capture. So why I really love this is because when we talk about leadership, the first place it starts is in your head. That is where the life force and that is where your soul matter is contained. That is where everything begins. In order to step into leadership, you have to go here first, and then it flows outwards. So this is where I wanted to start today. So how I'm going to do it, how I'm going to structure it is I'm going to give you a little bit of background about myself, a bit of personal story, why I'm here. Then I'm going to talk about leadership and making a difference. Then I'm going to invite you to do an exercise. I'm going to get you all engaging and doing some exercises. And then I'm going to take you through 3 mindset distinctions that will really help you to have a more conscious leadership. And then I'm going to invite you to ask some questions. So let me start with a bit about myself. Who am I? So as you know well, my name is Michele Attias, and I am originally from the Rock of Gibraltar, a tiny little peninsula in the south of Spain. As the youngest of 6 children, I watched with curiosity how my father and my uncle set up businesses successfully. I think my father had about 4 businesses on the go. None of them were academic. None of them had been to business school. None of them had a degree. But it really allowed me to understand that leadership is not what you're saying. It's not what you're doing. It's not even about what you're selling. It's about who you're being. And by that I mean, how are you interacting with yourself, your environment, other people? How are you being present? And the reason why I illustrate this is one of the first ways that I began to get really interested in leadership was as a child. So I'm going to go back to that story, but I'm going to carry on. And so I began to take on different type of roles. I was a dancer, a catwalk model. I did some tour guiding. I was in investment banking. I was even a magician's assistant on stage at one point. Jackie, you don't know that. Where I was cut in half, and I lived to tell the tale. It was only when, at the age of 30, I'd say about 20 years ago, I should probably reveal my age, when I saw myself living in the UK as a single parent, as a single mom, with 2 little kids, 3-month-old and a 2.5-year-old, that I realized that something had to change. I wanted to become a professional. I wanted to be a role model. I wanted to make my kids really proud of me. So as a mature student, I set off into university and I went off to study psychotherapy, juggling 3 jobs and 2 kids. After I qualified, I spent over 10 years in the mental health arena, working with people who were suicidal, addicted, abused, bereaved, depressed. Some were wealthy, some were poor. I worked with the more affluent communities, and I also worked with refugees, asylum seekers. It actually didn't matter because mental dysfunction doesn't discriminate. It happens to everyone. It was only after going through yet another personal roller coaster 7 years ago that I wanted to find a better way to work with clients. I didn't feel that therapy was really helping them. I mean, it was managing their behavior, but it really wasn't changing much. But also, I wanted to find something that could really help me to be more effective in my life. So I hired a coach who changed my life so incredibly and so substantially that I closed my therapy clinic and I set off in this incredible arena of helping people's lives. What I noticed was when I transitioned from therapist into coach was that as a therapist, I was the expert, the specialist. I was a bit of a know-it-all. Jackie laughs. I was a bit of a know-it-all. I was armed with academic study, qualifications, accreditations, registrations. But as I stepped into the arena of coaching, as you know, coaches really don't need qualifications. They don't need accreditations. They don't need to go to coaching school. In fact, there are some incredible coaches out there who have never been qualified in any of these arenas. So I realized that I couldn't hide behind my qualifications, my accreditations. I couldn't hide behind that anymore. Because as I was engaging coaching clients, these coaching clients were very, very different. They were functional. They knew what they wanted. And I had to step up very, very differently in leadership. Because my coaching clients had one question and one question only. And this wasn't about what qualification did I have or what coaching school did I go to. They had one question. And that is, can you help me? Can you take me from where I am now to where I want to be? And how I showed up was either allowing them to trust me or not. It was intangible. You couldn't smell it, you couldn't taste it. It was an energy. So it went far deeper than what I was presenting externally. Remember that 93% of communication is non-verbal. So I had to really tune up my inner way of being. And it's made me feel hugely insecure, brought up huge amounts of self-doubt. Even after years of working in psychotherapy, even after years of that, hadn't made a single bit of difference. But what I noticed yet again, just as I had as a child, was that leadership is about who you're being. And being able to lead by making a difference means that you have to go the extra mile. You have to tune yourself up so much further, fearlessly, really so much so. And what I want to do is, as I'm introducing leadership by making a difference, I want to go back to my story about my dad. So my father had a clothing store. He was also a tailor in Gibraltar. And I remember as a young child, I would watch how he served his clients. I mean, he was a successful man. I remember one time, I was about probably 6 or 7 years old, I was quite little, standing behind the cash register at the store and watching my father, who was all the way down the bottom of the shop, speaking to 4 or 5 Russian customers. My father spoke about 4 words in Russian. That was all. I watched how he led that conversation. I couldn't hear it, but I could watch how he led it. All I know was that my father wouldn't let go. And those Russian customers took a huge amount of bags of merchandise that day. I always remembered that. So a few years ago, I sat with my dad, and I'm really happy that I did that because he's now 96 years old and he just wouldn't remember this anymore. But I sat with my dad a few years ago, and I asked him, Dad, where did you get the confidence? Where did you get the self-esteem to show up in that way? How did you do that? And he looked at me totally baffled and confused. And he said to me, what does it have to be with, what does it have to do with confidence? What does it have to do with self-esteem? It doesn't have anything to do that at all. Sorry. It doesn't have anything to do with that at all. But here's what it has to do with. I sold the most amazing woolen coats. I knew that it would keep my Russian customers warm during the winter. I didn't care about myself. Where did I come into it? All I could think about was I wanted them to be warm. That's why I didn't let go. He said, and here's what happened. When these Russian customers got into their ship and arrived back into Russia, remember this was almost 50 years ago. When they got back to Russia, they told their friends who were coming into another naval ship into Gibraltar, they told their friends, when you get to Gibraltar, you go and find this gentleman, Attias the tailor, and you buy anything that he is selling you. My father sold his entire stock of woolen coats to his Russian customers based on 4 words in Russian. When we want to serve and make a difference, what we often do is we think, actually, once I'm more confident, then I'll do it. Maybe once I have more self-esteem, I'll do it. Maybe once I feel better about myself, I'll do it. It's always a when-then game. When this happens, then this will happen. And actually, you can do that right this second, right now, today. Because when you feel so connected to the service you are giving to someone, when you know with such certainty of how you can influence somebody's life immeasurably, you are going to be having a conversation from a very different place. Connected, engaged, present. Imagine feeling the same way about the clients that you approach as my dad did with his woolen coats. Knowing how you can help them, that their life is so much richer with you in it. So, leadership, as I said before, is more than a title, a role, a status. It goes far beyond that because it's about your motivation, your intention. It's an embodiment of qualities that comes out from this place where you're constantly in service. And this isn't something that you clock in or you clock out of. You can use a leadership mindset by making a difference wherever you are, whether you're at a conference, whether you're at a restaurant, whether you're at a coffee shop, at the gym, it doesn't matter. You're always coming from that place of service. I've had my best clients from the gym, from just having conversations with people when I'm having a great time in a class. From a bakery, I was in a bakery 7 months ago. Happened to talk to somebody who was waiting to buy his bread alongside me. 2 weeks later, he called me to ask if I could work with him. So this is something that you're constantly embodying and constantly putting out there to people. So what is your inner stance? And by this I mean, where do you lead from? Do you lead from a place of openness, compassion, love, communication, or from a place of insecurity, anger, stress? It's really important to see where you're leading from. And we're going to do an exercise very soon around that. But it's really important because our behavior as leaders comes from thoughts and beliefs. We have around 60,000 thoughts a day, 48 thoughts a minute. whizzing through our brains all the time. Even as I've been talking, we've had thousands of thoughts. And this isn't about making these thoughts into positive ones or trying to be the thought police, but just knowing that this is a high voltage scenario and sometimes very difficult to get clarity. And some of these thoughts might be, I'm not good enough, it's never going to work, I need to be respected, I have to show that I have it all together. It's a lot of thinking that piles up that makes it very difficult for us to show up in a way that we're making a difference, because part of that is opening up and going that extra mile without fear. So what I really would love you to do now is I would love to engage you into a short exercise. And before I tell you what the exercise is, what I'd love you to do is to get into partners, and then I can explain what it is. It could be the person next to you, it could be somebody you haven't sort of worked with before. So do you want to get into partners? I want one of you to be speaking and one of you to listen. And by listening, I mean not interrupting. So listen, but if your partner gets stuck, so people always share from the top level. If you want to go a little bit deeper, just say what else. It's a very easy thing to say. Just say what else, and that person will go a little bit deeper. What I would also suggest is that you take some paper and a pen or pencil, and the person who isn't speaking can jot down what you're saying, because that might really help later on to read it through. So I want you to do an exercise based on these two questions. What kind of leader do you want to be? And what do you want people who interact with you to remember you for? So in terms of what kind of leader do you want to be, it could be that you want to be more open, more present, more compassionate, more dynamic. You'll have your own version of this. And what do you want people who interact with you to remember you for? So if you start speaking, and what I will do is I will take 3 minutes per person. I know there's 3 of you there, but it'll be 3 minutes per person, and I will call time, okay? So if you want to start and explore these 2 questions, and then what we'll do is we'll feed back. So who would like to share? And remember that whatever you share is going to help somebody else. It's part of making a difference, is that somebody else will resonate with whatever it is that you share. That's how it always works. Who would like to share about what came up? Right, sorry.
So I think we came up with similar things, and I guess one of them we talked about was trust,
Okay.
and honesty. We talked about setting a culture so that people understand what the expectations are. And I guess the other one I think we both came up with was being innovative.
Right.
You know, we understand that what was good enough even a year ago maybe might not be good enough today. And people who interact, you know, I think we both felt that, again, particularly in today's political climate maybe,
Yes.
and trust and honesty are probably, and integrity are some of the highest things that will get people to believe in you. And I guess the other one we touched on was, you know, if you set that culture and you give people responsibility, you know,
Yes.
it's that they will step into that void, but it's a matter of doing that. And I think the other one we talked about a little bit was, you know, of trying to get that balance right of not being someone who over-promises and under-delivers, but not being someone who under-promises too much, of getting that like where it is believable, credible, and people can see what you're doing is innovative and has, you know, integrity.
Yes, and I really love that, because it sounds like trust is very much your foundation. And even, you know, so there's trust, there's kind of creativity, innovation. You're looking at how things are going to move forward as well. That's part of the innovative process. But that trusting foundation and not over-promising or under-delivering, but actually meeting with somebody's expectation, being very clear about what they're expecting and what you can provide for them. So that's very much part of truth, trust. So that's a great foundation in which to build that on. That's great. Thank you for sharing. Anything else, or does that feel complete?
Yeah, I think I would just add two things. One of them I didn't even say before, but I think sort of, someone who listens and isn't just, my way or the highway sort of thing, and not just listens, but then processes that. And I think, I started my career in an organization where it was sort of like, it didn't matter if you were the most senior person or the most junior person. If you were at the table, you were expected to be able to contribute, but then ultimately a decision's made and everyone moves forward together. Yes. And so that's sort of a collaborative environment where people can feel they can raise their hand, is, I think, important too.
Yeah, and to me, for people to be able to do that, there has to be a culture where things are more open, as you're saying, collaborative, those open conversations, you're saying something people are hearing, and that fear has to kind of go, because I think sometimes there is a lot of fear in culture as well, so people don't want to share too much, or people want to people please a little bit, and they're too scared to tell the truth. But there's something around having that collaborative process and being open, and for people to be heard, and that's such an important part of being a leader. It's not just about you being a leader and that everybody kind of has to follow you. It's about you creating other leaders. You're empowering people to go into their untapped potential, to be the best of who they are, and you're totally encouraging that. So that's wonderful. Thank you. Great. Does that feel okay? Anything else?
I just discovered over the years that facts and figures are very important.
Yes.
And next to that, is the difference in the words, the human skills. Very often people mix up human skills with soft skills. And soft skills will be ignored. And highly valued will be the human skills.
And when you say human skills, what do you mean?
Empathy.
Right.
Courage. Ethics. Morale.
And that's hidden, isn't it? That's something that you can't really, when you meet somebody, it's not like sort of them, it's a makeup that you can actually see. It's something that you feel, that empathy. It's something that transcends anything else. It's like you feel the empathy, you feel the compassion, you feel that humanity, or you don't.
We all wear a mask.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Take off the mask and say, here I am.
Yeah, it's about being human to human, rather than sort of expert to client, or there's that humanity, and people really connect with that, very much so. That's great, thank you. Anybody else would like to share what came up?
We had a bunch of empaths over here.
You had a threesome going on.
Three empaths.
I'm very curious about what came up there.
Well, we thought that what was interesting was what didn't come up actually, and it was that none of us, the top of our lists put successful. It was much more, again, about what Jens was saying about human connection and listening and allowing people to have permission to speak their minds and be wrong if they need to, and helping people grow and being kind and compassionate and empathetic and all of those things, as opposed to being successful.
Yeah. And I guess we have to redefine, what does successful mean? Because what it means for me is not what it means for you. Successful for me might be spending time with my kids, going away on holiday, being able to do what I want, when I want, however I want, and that might be success for me. It might not be that I am this, Mark Zuckerberg. It doesn't maybe align with that. So it's about finding out, what does success mean for you? And it could be very soft.
The other reason we didn't mention it is I think if you get those things right, it follows.
Yes, yes.
As opposed to it's a goal in itself.
Success is an outcome.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because it's a way that you show up. It's not something that you need to tell people how successful you are. You either look it or you don't. And that's something that people pick up as well. And it's a very inner type of success rather than money, title, status. It's a different type of success. Sorry, Gemma, it sounds like you wanted to say something.
No.
No.
I was just thinking.
Anything else that came out of your group?
I mean, we had humour come out as well. which I
Humour.
think-
Oh my God, that's such an important one. Absolutely. People forget that because we take ourselves far, far too seriously. We feel that we have to be professional. We have to be so serious. Actually, part of being in this work, and you're very much about human relationships and connection, is having that human piece, laughing, and still being able to show up successful, and still being able to show up in ways that people have that trust in you. See that you're coming from a place of truth. See that you're coming from a place of empathy, but you're still bringing humor into the piece. Fantastic. Oh wow. Who wants to go? Who wants to go first?
A question for you, but go first. Yeah. I mean, you see, we partnered really like deep, right? That's,
How deep? I love this.
No. I'm just,
We're gonna have group therapy here.
So some things were mentioned already. I just had some words like be a supportive leader,
Yes.
to make sure that you always meet the person you talk to on the same eye height, right? So that's
Nice.
not like
Yes.
hierarchy wise, behavior, open, honest, we already said, empathy, and you mentioned humor, and it's important always to show respect also as a leader, and because you can show humor that sometimes
Yes.
costs the other person, something
Oh,
like.
absolutely.
So this is also the balance that you have to keep, because you never know what the other person, where the other person is coming from, right? And you should maybe think, okay, this is my boss, so respect.
Absolutely. It's a respectful humor. It's not
Yeah.
crass.
Yeah,
It's not.
absolutely.
It's about respectful humor. And I love the fact that you're meeting people where they're at, rather than you racing ahead into. Because sometimes we speak to a client and we are thinking what we're thinking, and we're too involved in that. We're not really hearing them, and we're not really at their level, and we're not really connecting with them. We're too busy with our own stuff. So I think it's great that you're saying that meeting them at their level, which I think is really important. Fantastic. And it sounds
Yeah,
like...
I have a question for you about that.
Oh,
By raising those two questions, you think you can choose, or you believe it's a choice what kind of leader you want to be?
this is... Well, I'm gonna ask you another question in a minute. So you're going a little bit forward.
Okay.
So So tell me what your question is, because I don't understand it. So
Well, that it is a choice what kind of leader
Of
you
course
want to
it's a
be.
choice.
It's a choice.
Oh
it's
my
a rational
God.
thing then.
we're choosing how we lead. I chose how I led my day today. We're choosing every second of the day what we have for breakfast, how we show up, what we put our energies on, what we don't. And we can choose. Absolutely. This is like a menu of choices at a restaurant, and you're choosing to have the hors d'oeuvre, the main course, the dessert. You can choose, and then you have to step into that and look at, okay, this is the kind of leader that I want to be, but this is where I'm now, this is where I want to be. What's this piece here? What do I need to do differently now? Of course, absolutely. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Jackie. Right, so I'm going to ask you now to step into possibility. Okay, this is where your question. Step into possibility. You've already said the kind of leadership that you'd like to be and what you want people to remember you for. How are you going to demonstrate it, and how might this impact your team, clients, yourself? This is where you step into possibility. How are you going to demonstrate this? Does this mean that you're going to be sort of more proactive? Are you going to be more present? What are you going to do differently? Again, this is about possibility, because we can choose how we lead. It's not just the lucky few who are born leaders. We can step into this climate. So if you want to do another 3 minutes each, and then we're going to come back and we're going to feedback again. So, yeah, so 3 minutes starting now. Okay? Who would like to share? Who would like to feedback? Something that came up. Great, thank you. All right. I'm going to talk to you later because it sounds like it's going to take a long time.
No, I would like to
Absolutely.
understand a solution on that.
Absolutely.
Because I was unlucky, but that's my experience in my life.
Right, let me just...
All my bosses were so tough, so direct. If you don't do, you are out.
Yes, yes.
And I know that most of Italian entrepreneurs, I don't know, Sergio Macchione, Forchetti Provera, Capotti,
Yes.
were so tough and very difficult to have a relationship with them.
Yes. But that's great for them. That might not be who you want to be. As I said before, that might not be suitable for you or anybody else here. So it depends. It doesn't mean there's different ways of being successful. There's different ways of being in leadership. And that's really what we're talking about. So let me just move on here.
Yeah, but we are talking about business or not?
We're talking about business, absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Let's say so.
Okay.
We will demonstrate it honestly, openly, and
Yes.
friendly.
So, sorry, honestly, openly and friendly. Absolutely.
And how might this impact on the team, prospects, and clients? So we always grow. Yes, share, grow, learn, share, and grow. And it's like a circle,
Yes.
which has always increased our knowledge.
Right, so learn, share and grow. Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
In the school.
And from Italian perspective.
And the business arena, in the school, I agree. In the business arena,
Right, who else would like to share? So let's get focused. Who else would like to share about what came up in that exercise? Yeah,
Well,
okay.
we summarized it at the end, you have to walk the talk in your behavior, in your verbal, non-verbal communication.
Yes,
In the way you want, they want to see you as a leader. So do what you think that you want to do. Don't tell I like you and you act different.
yes,
So
absolutely.
walk the talk.
Exactly. Perfect. So walking the talk, really showing up in that way, and people will look at absolutely. Fantastic. Anything else that came up for anybody?
One of the things that we talked about is listening to people.
Yes.
There are two levels of listening. The first level, which is the easy part, is listen to answer.
Yes.
The difficult part is listen to understand.
So it's a different type of listening, isn't it?
There's a huge difference in
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
To understand other people or just to answer, to show that you know better.
Absolutely. And I think that requires for you to be present in the conversation. And really, sometimes we have a lot of overthinking when people are talking. We're trying to think ahead what we want to say. We're not really hearing what they're saying, really hearing what they're saying. And it's about really hearing. And for that, we have to slow down and we have to be more present in that conversation. So it's absolutely, thank you. That's really important. And you wanted to say something?
Yeah, well, it's the same thing about being present. 100% present means today there's a lot of thinking about multitasking.
Yes.
And people think that, we keep talking, I'm on the computer or I'm on my phone, I'm listening. And that type of things, again, you said, 93% is not necessarily verbal. So when somebody's talking to you or you're part of a conversation and you're doing other things because you can do many things at once, at the end, that's really not true. The brain can only do one thing at a time, maybe very fast. The second thing is raising your level of consciousness to make sure that, you every minute and every second you know exactly what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're acting. And the third thing, the thing that we talk about is, working on yourself. It's very hard, to give something that you really don't have.
Yes.
So if you don't work first on yourself and make sure that you have the right level of energy, the right level of positiveness, the right level of service, the right level of love, it's very hard to give that to other persons if you really don't have it yourself. Right?
Exactly. Well, that's what you were saying before, which was you have to You know, you can't just talk the talk, you've actually got to walk it, because it's something that people can feel. So absolutely, and the multitasking as well, is people multitask a lot because we are constantly available to everyone at any time. Our phones are going off, we're having a coffee with somebody, even the phones are going off, the texts are going off, people are wanting to contact us, there's this urgency, we have to be available, and that really stops people being present. Absolutely stops people being present, and you miss a lot when you're not actually there. When you're physically there, but you're not actually there, you miss a huge amount of what the other person is telling you. And I think you miss out on a lot of that relationship. And the person misses out on you. Because I think we end up being a very diluted version of who we are rather than a more concentrated version of ourselves. Anybody else want to make a comment or feedback?
Can I make I think we've got to be careful we don't get mixed up between leadership and management style as well. Because going back to Piero's point, I mean, the reason people like Steve Jobs were good as leaders, because they were visionary. And a lot of the people who've been the very tough, uncompromising type, everyone knows very clearly what they believe in and what the expectation is. That's the leadership bit. And I'm sure people like Steve Jobs, he built round him people who were good at managing the process, managing the system. But his leadership was about, you know, he was uncompromising, this is what we're going to achieve. And I think that is the, you know, that's where we have to be a little bit careful about what a leader provides and what a good manager provides.
Absolutely, I agree, absolutely. Anybody else wants to make a comment?
Annie Mia mentioned about the fact that if you are the leader that you and your team want it to be, they're more motivated, they're more confident, and the client would see that. The client would see that you guys, you know, the team is a real team and a true team that can work together. So they're not getting just the consultant, they're getting the consultant and the team together.
Yes.
Who have a unified standard of delivering what they want to deliver.
Absolutely. So it's about being, go on.
And Janet also added that it actually affects the candidates. If you can be a kind of a leader and let them trust you and be honest to you, it helps you a lot.
Yes.
I think
absolutely.
that was very good.
So it builds that trust again, it builds that trust. And that's really very much what it's about, and the listening and the being present. And that's fantastic. Anybody else want to say anything before I move on? And you'll have a chance to ask some questions later on anyway. Right, so let me move on. What I want to do now is I just want to take you through 3 mindset distinctions. And I think it gives you more conscious leadership when you're stepping into one mindset or when you're stepping into another. So the first one I'm going to go into is impressive versus expressive. How we're showing up. Think about somebody in your life that has made a difference to you. Maybe as a child, maybe later on in your later years. Why was that so? Was it because they were trying to be impressive? Trying to impress something on you? Or because in their authenticity or their way of being or their expressiveness, they allowed you to be more of who you are? And so the reason why this is really, really important, when we look at making a difference and for people to connect with you, I mean, you talked before, you touched on how we wear masks. And that's very much so. We try and impress. And so when we're in impressive mode, it's very difficult to make a difference. And when we move into expressiveness, people feel that around us. So I just want to illustrate this with an example of a client that I had. And I'm going to call my client Paul. And Paul came to me for coaching because, for a variety of reasons. But one of the issues that he had was that every month, he worked in an aviation company, he was a manager there. Every month he had to go to a business networking event, and he literally hated it. And so he was being asked to go to this event and bring in some clients. But he literally used to walk in, he should take out his business card, give it to someone, tell them a little bit about what he does and trying to be impressive, and then leave within 30 minutes later, he was gone. So he was in impressive mode, and he couldn't get clients. He couldn't connect with people. So this is how I moved him from one state into the other. I asked him to think about this networking event and think of 3 clients, 3 people that are there, 3 companies that he would love to connect with. So not 10, 20, 50, not a huge amount, just 3. But I really wanted him to intensify on that. So I asked him to almost date those companies for the next few weeks. Go on their website, find out what is working for them, what isn't, what's missing, what could be done differently. And then ask himself 10 ways that he can make a difference, add value to these companies. Now, Paul, before that, was in impressive mode. It was all involvement about self. And he moved into the next thing, which was involvement about this client. And how could he offer them, and how could he add value? And he really loved this exercise. He was engaged. He was excited. He spent 4 weeks doing this, getting really homed in on these companies. He called me on the day of the networking event, and he said, "You won't believe what's happened. Not only have I connected with these 3 companies, and I've actually already set up meetings with 2 of them, but now I've got a queue of people behind me who want to speak to me." That's how he was showing up. So he moved from one mindset to the other, and people could feel it. There was no involvement with self, there was involvement with other. How can I add value into your life, and what can I do for you? And people felt it. So that's one way that you can do it. The next one is worthy versus useful. And this leads me on very beautifully from the example I just gave you with Paul, was that often we don't make a difference, and often we don't go the extra mile because we are constantly asking ourselves, am I worthy enough? Who am I to make that bigger proposal? Who am I to actually go and contact that client? Who am I? So we get into this worthiness issues, and actually worthiness has no measurement. I have a lot of clients with a lot of worthiness issues who get preoccupied with that before they're going to go into something. But if you move into worthiness versus usefulness, usefulness has a measurement. So if you're about to face someone that you have wanted to face, a client, a prospect, a particular company, and you get into this worthiness mode of who am I to approach them? Am I worthy enough? Move into usefulness. Can I be useful to them? And if so, how can I do that? This is again how we move from one mindset to the next. The last one is growth versus safety. Ask yourself regularly, which option will grow me and which option will keep me safe? People often stay in safety because they are terrified of feeling the most horrendous of feelings, and that is rejection, somebody saying no to something that you propose, failure. So people keep safe. They don't want to get too uncomfortable. Get uncomfortable every so often. It is unbelievable what you can create. Uncomfortable isn't telling you anything about the situation. All it's telling you is that you are in uncertain territory, that you've never been in this territory before, and that's going to feel uncomfortable. When I arrived into Denmark, never been to Denmark before, I don't know the language, I don't know the area, don't know the currency that well. It was uncomfortable. It didn't mean I needed to stop. And that's what uncomfortable very much is about. Be in that state as often as you can, because sometimes that is what you need to do to grow. It also allows you to connect to your untapped potential. You don't even know who you can be yet if you were only a little bit more uncomfortable every so often. So I've now finished with these 3 mindset distinctions. And what I'd like to do just before I finish is, any workshop that you go on or any talk that you go on, you consume a lot of information. But information doesn't necessarily translate into transformation. Information is concepts, and transformation is about application, about applying that. So part of slowing you down is to think about today, about my talk today. If there's something that perhaps you had an insight, perhaps something I said, perhaps something that your partner said, perhaps something that you noticed about yourself, think about that one insight and ask yourself, based on this one thing I learned today, this tiny, tiny thing, what can I start to do differently? That is how things change. That is how things move, by making incremental changes. Tiny, people think it has to be something massive, big, huge, Hollywood style. It's all about making tiny little changes along the way that will open you up further and further and will grow you even more. And that's a way to go from information to transformation. So I wanted to open this up now for questions, if anybody has any questions before I finish off. And you've got my books there and you've got my business card. If anybody wants any coaching resources or audios, I'm happy to send them. So please let me know, or Jackie know, or Andreas know. But do I have any questions anybody would like to ask from today? Anything that didn't come up in the feedback?
Well, perhaps one question is
Yes.
a bridge to the question I raised before. When it is yours, becoming a certain leader, how about alignment with your skills, talent, and your possibilities, and also your personality? That must be somewhere connecting with each other.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you're playing a role.
Yes, you don't want to play a role. Part of stepping into this is being more of who you are. Not changing yourself, being more of who you are. Switching up the volume of that. And that means more fearless kind of leadership. A more fearless, part of doing that is being uncomfortable. Part of doing that is being uncomfortable, being, not all the time, but doing things that push your comfort zone more often. But absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there another question after that, or comment?
Thinking about it. Okay, it's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay to be you. That is where it's all about bringing out our best self completely. And I think most of us pull it back, like we can't show who we are. It's too scary. It's about showing. It's as I said before, it's about showing our best self and turning that up.
Okay. Can you give us, say, 2, 3 top topics how to choose the best culture for the person?
The best culture.
Culture. Some candidates ask me, Andre, can you advise us how to choose a culture for myself?
Coach.
Company culture.
Coach.
How to make this choice?
I think people have to shop around quite a bit. They have to connect with a person. Is it an actual coach? Yeah. Is that what you're talking about?
No.
Sorry.
I met a candidate.
Yes.
And so we're discussing something, and I see that in some areas, and or they
Yes.
call me and ask, I want to find a culture for myself.
Yes.
How to differentiate, how to understand that this is a good culture for the person?
So the best way to do it is to try it out. Is to ask them to give them a sort of a session, a complimentary session. Make sure that they connect, that there is. It's a bit like dating, really. You have to have a bit of chemistry. That there has to be that connection between you. You feel that that person is listening to you. You feel heard. You feel that how you want to grow and why you want to have a coach, that they're going to be able to meet that. Often I find that, I've had many, many coaches myself, and I always find that if the person that's going to coach me hasn't been through what I want to go through, I don't really want them as my coach. So it's the same thing as when I just asked you all those questions. Those are questions I've asked myself, and those are questions I've worked through myself. Otherwise, I'm not going to pass them on to you because there's no point in that. I can't take you further than where I've been. So you have to make sure that say they want to work on, I don't know, confidence. It has to make sure that that person is quite specialized in confidence, perhaps as they're talking in conversation in that coaching call, that the coach is showing up in that way. So you need to shop around. Literally, you need to shop around, and the person has to feel that coach. Because coaching is not a concept, it's an experience. You either feel that they're with you and they're going to give you what you want, or you don't.
Okay.
Does that help you?
Yeah.
And we can talk more about that later on if you want. Anybody else has any more questions? Or anything else they want to bring up?
Can I just make a comment on that? You're talking about people going into the room. To me, one of the key things, perhaps I mentioned it, is knowledge. If you're going into something where you haven't been, it's unfamiliar, whether it's a new country, the way to build your knowledge, I think, Paolo, you were talking about this, when you go into something where you're unfamiliar, if you go in still unfamiliar, you're not going to have that innate confidence. If you've done your homework, you understand the people, and this is about hard work and about making sure you have that knowledge, suddenly people want to talk to you. You've got the confidence to go into them. So to me, that is a key. It's not just a skill, it's something that you ought to do before you go into those situations.
Yes,
like if I'm going into Saudi Arabia for the first time, I would want full knowledge about everything about that.
Absolutely.
To have that confidence. Or if I go into a business situation and I know there are people in there who are in a particular field, I will absolutely spend the time to make sure that I go in there and I don't make, it's making the fool of yourself
again. Absolutely. And of course, when I came to Denmark, I did my homework before, but I still felt uncomfortable because it was new territory. So it's not about not doing anything at all and just getting uncomfortable. It's not about that. It's about pushing your comfort zone and doing things that sometimes are a stretch. And that you notice yourself grow through it. That's the only way we grow. Anybody want to ask anything else before we finish? You can always come to me afterwards. So it's not like I won't speak to you afterwards. So anybody else? Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for being such an engaged audience. I've really loved it. Thank you. And anything else, as I said before, please come and speak to me. Even you.
Thank you.